Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us here at KAKM for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting this evening's show. On the satellite imagery out west, I've got the Aleutians right here, Kamchatka Peninsula, the Sea of Okhotsk, and low pressure there circulating just west of Shemya, keeping mostly cloudy skies and showers in that area. We've got a weakening front extending out from that system, bringing rain across the northern Bering Sea, and then southeastward across the Pribilof Islands and down into the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula area there. Then back to the west, another front here coming across eastern Asia and Manchuria in this area there. They'll be pushing into the northwest Pacific over the next couple of days. Farther to the east, you can see a lot of moisture caught up in southeasterly wind flow, pulling it right up into the North Gulf Coast areas, and a frontal system approaching the Panhandle this afternoon with some pretty gusty southeast winds of up to 35 miles an hour in some locations there, with rain gradually spreading inland to that area. Rain up along the North Gulf Coast today and in across south central Alaska, with some snow across the Copper River Basin, actually rain and snow from there up into the North Waitok area. Otherwise, just a lot of high clouds here spreading into the Tanana Valley on back toward Norton Sound, and a cloudy day here out over the Yukon Delta, and drier conditions pushing in across Kodiak Island today. Drier day there after all the rain you had overnight last night. And then on the chart today, you can see the rain that pushed to the west of the island there in over Bristol Bay. Areas of rain across northeast Bristol Bay here, south central Alaska, kind of combining the front here with this moisture in the trough, linking up, making for just a wet day across south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast. Snow, depending on your elevation here, on up into the eastern Tanana Valley areas with an increase in the clouds to the east. Delta Junction, southeast winds gusting up to about 35 miles an hour, and pretty breezy conditions back here over the northern Bering Sea through the Bering Strait area, seeing winds of 15 to 30 miles an hour and a few higher gusts there, but mostly clear in areas there from the North Slope and the Arctic coast with generally light winds. Did have some clouds here in the eastern Arctic coast, but clear skies back to the west, and actually where it shows up whiter there, that's the colder surface temperatures, and where the skies are clear. Otherwise, kind of a break here, western Bristol Bay, and a weak low south of the Alaska Peninsula. Here's that weakening front that brought the rain into the Pribilof Islands today. Both St. George and St. Paul picked up about 1/4 of an inch of rain, but much lighter amounts down to the south there, with Unalaska and Cold Bay only getting 1/100th of an inch in the last 24 hours. And then the main low back out here over the western Bering, keeping clouds and showers going out in that area. But there was some clearing around Adak and Atka, especially Atka this afternoon. Saw some sunshine today. And the forecast for tonight, that trough kind of stays put, so the periods of rain and fog will continue here over the Pribilofs down into the Alaska Peninsula, and to a lesser extent over the eastern Aleutians. Stays showery with that low out over the western Bering Sea, or out over the western Aleutians. Otherwise, we've got low pressure here near Togiak Bay, so periods of rain across the southwest interior. And again, this trough right up along the coast, periods of rain from Yakutat westward in across Prince William Sound, south central Alaska, and then that kind of becomes a mixture of rain and snow. And actually, slight chance of some freezing rain later tonight and into tomorrow morning there for areas of the central and upper Tanana Valley. In fact, there's a winter weather advisory out that begins at 10 p.m. tonight here for the 40-mile country, the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, and that's looking for 4 to 7 inches of snow above 3,000 feet, and that's for tonight into tomorrow morning. Otherwise, just some lighter amounts of snow with this trough back to the west. Rain or snow, again, depending on your elevation here, and that'll be mostly rain across the Yukon Delta. Dry weather continues, say, from the northern Koyukuk Valley and the Brooks Range, North Slope areas in the eastern Arctic coast. Pretty brisk winds here through this area down into the St. Lawrence Island zone there. And again, the rain here over the eastern Aleutians, which tomorrow will become a lot more showery here for the Alaska Peninsula. 988 millibar low there near Cape Newenham, or actually Kipnuk, will keep it pretty showery there over the deltas. And again, that low kind of drifting southward, but not much change in the weather out over the western Aleutians. Still pretty showery, but not much in the way of any significant winds out there. And this trough, look for some light rain at times here from the Tanana Valley back to the southwest to the Alaska Range. Showers here along the North Gulf Coast all the way into the southeast coast there. Rain changing to showers. Still that southwest flow continues, so that's going to keep the area there in a wet weather pattern. And there's the next system to the south that we'll see on Sunday, kind of moves up the coastline and into about this position here with the front right across the panhandle. So 15 to 25 mile per hour winds in advance of that front with rain all the way down to the Queen Charlotte Islands. Looks like periods of rain for the North Gulf Coast again. Prince William Sound in over south central Alaska. Should be a mostly dry day with mostly cloudy skies over the Copper River Basin, and could see a few breaks here on Sunday in the Tanana Valley. And then this old band associated with that trough there from the Yukon Delta up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range there, southeastern Brooks Range. Could be some areas of light rain with that. Light rain, very light rain, nothing really significant with that. And then there's a chance of some light snow, fog along the eastern Arctic coast and the North Slope areas, and less of that back to the west there. Most of the strongest winds will be over the Russian Far East here with the main low center south of St. Lawrence Island. So showers continue here along the southwest coast right into Bristol Bay. Southerly flow may allow a few showers to sneak into the southern and southwest coast of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, basically dry day, mostly cloudy skies, however, with a lot of showers out over the Bering Sea and mostly over the central and western Aleutians. Could see some breaks here over the Fox Islands with pretty light winds coming up for that area on Sunday, with a little bit more in the way of significant wind, but not too strong out over the western areas there. And for temperatures today, quite a range here from 63. These are early, that was earlier today there for Sitka, and net down here reached 67, which was the warm spot in the state today. Otherwise, 55 this afternoon. Those temperatures fell as the rain moved in with the front, just 46 up at Juneau. 52 degrees in Yakutat, a little bit cooler over at Cordova, mostly in the lower to mid 40s here across south central Alaska, although Talkeetna did push up to 47, and Seward had 49, while Homer checked in with 50. About the same lower 50s here for Kodiak Island. Notably cooler where snow fell most of the day at Golcano, where they had 33 degrees, and rain over at Northway, 39 degrees at Delta Junction with a wind. Fairbanks up to 46, much cooler, 31 degrees over at Tanana. And farther up to the north there, 34 at Bettles. Same temperature there at Fort Yukon with 25. Arctic Village, 10 degrees. Anatuvik and Umiat had 11 degrees, Umiat Airfield there. And kind of contrasted from west to east here in the temperatures, where there was low clouds, patchy fog, and a little more of a breeze condition there, mostly in the mid to upper 20s over the eastern Arctic coast, but clear skies, light winds, 7 degrees at Barrow, 14 at Point Lay, and clear skies here over the northwest areas, 30 degrees at Point Hope, 34 at Buckland, with 27 at Kotzebue, and mostly sunny skies here across the Seward Peninsula as well, Nome up to 41. Back to the southeast here, McGrath had 34. We'll see in the lower to mid 30s here across the southwest interior to upper 30s along the coast. Mid 40s for the Pribilofs, 54 degrees this afternoon in Adak. Otherwise mid 40s here for the eastern Aleutians, upper 40s, lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. Lows tonight, 40s to lower 50s for the Panhandle, mostly in the lower 40s here across southern Alaska, mid 40s the Alaska Peninsula area. Otherwise, teens and 20s Arctic coast, north slope, a little chillier there through the Brooks Range, and then south of the mountains, mostly in the 20s. 30s here over the southwest interior. Highs for tomorrow, again, upper 20s. A little bit warmer up there along the Arctic coast in the forecast anyway, with upper 20s all the way down to the Brooks Range. Lower 40s up into the Tanana Valley, again with upper 40s and lower 50s over south central Alaska. Lower to mid 50s there for the southeast coast, and upper 30s from the northern Bering Sea, otherwise about 50 degrees or so there for the Aleutians. And for flying weather, IFR here up along the central and north coast of the Panhandle, and then also over the toward the border there, otherwise marginal VFR. IFR pretty widespread from the North Gulf Coast areas into Prince William Sound, extending back across the Barren Islands, southern Kenai Peninsula area, right up to the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range areas. Marginal VFR at times over the North Slope and Arctic coastal areas. Otherwise, mostly VFR here through the central interior areas, and marginal conditions over the Pribilofs down to the Alaska Peninsula area and the western Aleutians. And as far as passes go, Anaktuvuk, VFR, but with a band of moisture gradually pushing northward, trending toward marginal VFR, especially on the southern entrance in the afternoon. That forecast good for Adigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR in the eastern approaches, otherwise marginal. Rainy, marginal VFR. Tomorrow, windy, could see some marginal VFR in the southern approach, otherwise VFR. And for Isabel, looking marginal. Mentasta, the entire eastern Alaska Range looks pretty marginal. Tanita, also marginal. Portage, marginal VFR with IFR on that eastern approach. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet here, quite a ways north, St. Lawrence Island, right up in across the Kobuk Valley, and then down into the eastern Tanana Valley, 6,000 feet here up over the south and southwest interior areas. Even milder over the Panhandle, 8 to 10,000 feet out there. A little bit cooler out here over the Bering Sea, where they're running about 2 to 4,000 feet. And for icing, up along the North Gulf Coast here, where all the moisture is, right into the Panhandle, look for some light to isolated moderate rime, possibly mixed icing through this area, and areas of up into the central and eastern interior, and then another batch kind of extending back across the Selawik Valley area, Seward Peninsula, all the way down to Nunivak Island. Could see some areas of icing over Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and back out with that low center over the western Aleutians. And looking at the upper level pattern here, low pressure over the western Aleutians, still pretty much in place. Another one here over the southeast Bering Sea. The main jet well to the south here, taking a turn to the northeast and cutting in across the southern Panhandle about 100 knots. Most of the interior and southern interior or North Gulf Coast under a mild southeasterly wind flow, only at about 30 knots here. The stronger winds staying to the south at 33,000 feet. 9,000 feet showing southerlies 25 to 30 knots here across the Panhandle, lighter southerlies along the North Gulf Coast, easterlies up to 30 knots through the north central interior, up to 45 knots on the eastern Arctic coast, as well as the extreme western coast there. Those northerlies 25 knots down to about St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise lighter winds here across the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. 3,000 feet south to southeast, only at about 10 knots here across the Gulf of Alaska. A little bit brisker here along the Panhandle, 15 to 25 knots there. Easterlies up to 25 across the upper Yukon, Koyukuk, in toward the Seward Peninsula areas. 25 to 40 knot winds out of the east and east-northeast through the along the Arctic coast. northeasterlies 35 across St. Lawrence Island, and not too bad wind-wise over the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. So looking at turbulence below about 5,000 feet here over the southern southeast coast down to about the Queen Charlottes, maybe another area right in there. Otherwise, pretty smooth here across southern Alaska. Occasional moderate chop here from about Point Lay southward, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope area, in toward the Bering Strait, and then the eastern Arctic coast. Look for occasional moderate chop there, again below about 6,000 feet. Otherwise, pretty smooth conditions. Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, all the way out until you reach Shimia and Attu. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening is Bill Compton. Bill was on last time, and if you saw the program, I think you would agree with me. Bill is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on fuel management and flight planning. And he just got started about a couple of concepts that on how he plans and the importance of airspeed, the importance of center of gravity, fuel flow and things like that. But I want to pick it up there. So Bill, welcome back.
Thank you.
One of the things you mentioned that is a key concept is L over D max. Can you talk about that?
Well, L over D max would be the absolute best range angle of attack to fly for a trip. And it's too slow, and it is impractical. So increasing the speed somewhat over LD max will sacrifice some range, but you can initially get a lot of speed addition for very little range loss. And that balance depends on how far the flight's, how much range you need for a specific flight.
Give our audience an idea of the length of some of these flights. How long? I mean, I think you mentioned 17 hours was your longest?
Oh, my first oceanic was Cold Bay to Honolulu, and that was 17 hours and 49 minutes. And that was pretty difficult to sit in the chair and the seat that long. My more recent flights have been down to 14 hours, and if I ever do any more, I think I'll turn up the speed a little bit more.
One of the things that impressed me was how you plan for reserves. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I plan for the computed fuel from starting up the engine to top of climb, to destination, descent, missed approach, going to the alternate, and landing. And whatever that amounts to, I want 110% of that amount of fuel. Plus, I want another 1 hour and 30 minutes of contingency or holding fuel. And that has not been difficult to maintain that level of fuel with my airplane and the trips I make.
So let me see if I can restate that. You plan the entire flight, climb, level off, en route, descent, how much fuel that takes. Then you take 110% of that, right? And that's your baseline, and then you add to that an hour and a half of reserve.
Well, almost. It's fuel to destination plus a missed approach and going to alternate. That's 110%.
Well, I would offer for the people out there in TV land who fly their airplanes down to quite frankly, I think the FAA minimums are not even on target. When you talk about 30 minutes of fuel for really, or 45 minutes, not me, but I'm glad to hear that on really serious flights like that, I think that formula is amazing. Talk a little bit about what happens to your CG when en route when you're burning off fuel.
Well, my fuel tanks are forward on the airplane, and that's a bit of a problem for me With the cabin tank, the weight is more toward the rear. And my first instinct, flying with that 660 pounds of fuel behind me, is to get that tank empty. But only recently have I realized when I do that, I'm throwing my center of gravity forward, which results in less miles per gallon. And so it's important not only to have center of gravity figured out for your takeoff, your overweight takeoff, which is very important, but also to maintain the same center of gravity for the whole flight, which means a lot of computation of how to sequence your tanks.
Wow. Bill, we've run out of time one more time. Once again, we've got about just a little bit less than a minute. Talk real quickly about I think it was your last flight with Judge Greg Miller, and what happened to you when you approached Seattle area.
Oh, well, we had a great flight from Hilo to Everett Field in Washington, and we were, the weather was low IFR, and we were getting vectored for the ILS at Payne Field, and things just weren't quite right. And I said, Greg, this is no good. Let's go to Bellingham, and we did, and it was a little better there until we got there, and on the ILS at Bellingham, we broke out at 300 feet, and Greg was flying left seat for that leg, and he did a beautiful job of keeping the needle centered and just planning it beautifully on the runway, and it was just a great end to a great trip.
Well, that's an amazing story, and after what, a 14-hour flight or something, 301 or whatever, that's my hat's off to both of you. Bill, I want to get you on again, and I want to talk about something else that I think will be very interesting to our audience, and that is the argument of Lena Peak or Richard Peak. So if you can make it, I'll get you on next time and talk about that. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Please tune in next time. You'll get more of Bill Compton's sage wisdom on fuel management.
Looking at today's sea ice analysis here, still have a narrow area, or a ever-growing narrower area of sea ice-free waters here from the central Arctic coast onto the east, and the forecast for the next 5 days is this area will continue to fill in, and then back to the Chukchi Sea area, the ice edge up through here, that's forecast to expand southwestward 20 to 35 nautical miles, again during the same 5-day period, which takes us through Wednesday. On to the marine forecast here, the southeast winds 25 knots, so small craft advisories all along the coastline, seas 10 to 11 feet out there, small craft advisories there for Clarence Strait and also up there for Lynn Canal. Outlook for Sunday, not much change here. Small craft advisories along the coast there for 8 to 12 foot seas and 25 knot winds. Southerlies 25 knots, Clarence Strait, southeast 25 for Stevens Passage, and then lighter winds for northern Lynn Canal. For Prince William Sound tomorrow, southeast 15, Cook Inlet northeasterlies 10 to 15 knots, and southerlies at 20 knots with 9 to 10 foot seas for the North Gulf Coast. Southeast winds 15 to 20 knots across Kodiak Island, the Barrens. And then for Sunday, westerlies at 20 there along the east side of Kodiak Island, and west-southwest 20 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. Light northeasterlies there for Prince William Sound, southerlies for the eastern Gulf Coast at 20 knots, and light winds for Cook Inlet. For the Alaska Peninsula, westerlies 15 to 20 knots, and for Bristol Bay, a light southwest breeze at 15 with 3 foot seas. Southeast 15 here southwest of Kodiak Island. And then for Sunday, southwest 20 knots there from Sitkinak over to about Chignik, otherwise south to southwest 15 for the peninsula, and light southwest winds continue for Bristol Bay. For the eastern Aleutians, west to southwest 10 to 15 knots, so not much significant winds anywhere along the Aleutians here, except out to the west we've got northeasterlies there 25 knots with 9 foot seas. And for Adak and Atka, pretty light south to southwest winds, laying down pretty good for tomorrow. and then those pick up a little bit, become northerly here for the western zones at about 20 knots on Sunday. North to northeast, 15 to 20 knots. Not too bad there for the central Aleutians, and the light wind pattern continues, but the direction changes for the eastern Aleutians, east to northeast at 10 to 15. And for the southwest coast, again, Nunivak Island kind of a breaking point here. North, got north winds at 20, northwest 15 to the south. Same thing for the Pribilofs. Small craft advisories for the St. Matthew Island area, as well as St. Lawrence Island for 25 to 30 knot winds. That holds through Sunday as well, 25 to 30 knots through these areas. More of a northeast direction there for St. Lawrence Island. And low pressure right in this area, so easterlies north of Nunivak Island on the light side, and south 15. South of the island, northwest 15 for the Pribilofs. For the Arctic coast, we've got gales going, easterlies 35 knots here for the eastern coastline, along with heavy freezing spray warnings. And from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast 35 knots as well. And then for Sunday, easterlies 30 knots, pretty brisk winds continue for the eastern Arctic coast, and then gales from Wales all the way up to Cape Beaufort there, northeast 35 knots, heavy freezing spray just about all areas. And for tonight, again, winter weather advisory out for the upper Tanana Valley above 3,000 feet for 4 to 7 inches of snow. Otherwise, periods of rain all of the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast into south central Alaska, even across northern Bristol Bay. Some light rain possible there for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And showers for the Panhandle and into southern Alaska. A little bit of moisture up to the north. And then for Sunday, more rain for the southeast coast. Periods of rain for south central Alaska and also along that trough in the interior.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.